Missouri has been Union and Confederate, Northern and Southern, Midwestern, yet Appalachian. It sits at the geographic center of the United States, yet somehow never at the center of the story America tells about itself. That's not a coincidence. That's not an oversight. That's a pattern. Missouri didn't fail to fit the American narrative. It was too complicated to include, too contradictory to simplify, too central to ignore, but too messy to celebrate. America loves clean stories, heroes and villains, winners and losers, states that represent something singular and marketable. Missouri refused to cooperate. It held Union and Confederate sympathies simultaneously. It built systems that powered westward expansion while remaining anonymous. It absorbed national tensions without exploding in ways that made good television. Today, you'll hear 25 hard truths explaining why Missouri never fit the story, and why that discomfort still matters more than most people realize. Let's begin. 25. Missouri was born as a compromise, not a vision. Missouri did not enter the Union with clarity, purpose, or a defining identity. It entered as a political deal, a bargaining chip in a larger negotiation that had nothing to do with what Missouri actually was. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 was not about Missouri's future. It was about delaying a national reckoning over slavery. Missouri would enter as a slave state. Maine would enter as a free state. Balance preserved. Crisis postponed. From its first moment of statehood, Missouri existed to keep peace between factions that would eventually tear the country apart anyway. It was born not from vision, but from avoidance, a placeholder in someone else's argument. States that enter the Union as symbols of something greater get celebrated. States that enter as compromises get forgotten. Missouri was a solution to a problem, never a destination in its own right. Number 24. It was both Union and Confederate at the same time. The Civil War forced Americans to choose sides. Missouri refused, or rather, could not. Missouri had two governments during the Civil War. One operated from Jefferson City, loyal to the Union. The other operated in exile, aligned with the Confederacy. Both claimed legitimacy. Both had supporters willing to kill for their cause. This was not abstract political disagreement. Neighbor fought neighbor. Families split internally. Guerrilla warfare turned the state into a bloodbath that did not follow neat battle lines. Quantrill's raiders and other irregular forces committed atrocities that official histories prefer to minimize. America prefers clean sides, good guys and bad guys, blue and gray. Missouri offered none of that clarity. It was both simultaneously, violently, and unresolvably. That complexity made Missouri impossible to include in the heroic narratives either side wanted to tell afterward. The state sits on a cultural fault line. Missouri is not one culture forced into state boundaries. It is several cultures, overlapping, competing, and often contradicting each other. Northern Missouri feels Midwestern, flat farmland, German and Scandinavian immigrant influences, agricultural rhythms that match Iowa and Illinois. Southern Missouri mirrors Appalachia, with Scots-Irish heritage, mountain culture, folk traditions, and a deep suspicion of outside authority. Cities like St. Louis and Kansas City developed industrial and immigrant identities shaped by rivers, railroads, and waves of migration from Europe and the American South. Rural areas kept frontier instincts long after the frontier officially closed. Missouri is not one place pretending to be unified. It is several identities forced into one border by cartographers who did not ask permission. This internal diversity makes Missouri impossible to summarize, and summaries are what narratives require. 22. Missouri was central but never celebrated. Geography placed Missouri at the crossroads of American expansion. Rivers converged here, trails launched from here. Goods, people, and ideas moved through Missouri on their way to everywhere else. The Santa Fe Trail started in Missouri. The Oregon Trail started in Missouri. Lewis and Clark launched their expedition from Missouri. The Pony Express operated through Missouri. Railroads that connected east to west passed through Missouri. But movement does not create fame. It creates invisibility. People remember destinations, not corridors. They remember where they arrived, not where they passed through. Missouri made America function. It enabled expansion, commerce, and connection that built the nation. But enabling is not the same as starring. Missouri was infrastructure, essential, invisible, and taken for granted. The state that made westward expansion possible rarely appears in the stories about westward expansion. 21st, the Mississippi River overshadowed the state it defined. The Mississippi River is one of America's most powerful symbols: commerce, adventure, Mark Twain, steamboats, and the romance of moving water. It's legendary. But people associate the Mississippi with Louisiana, with New Orleans, with the Deep South. They do not associate it with Missouri, even though Missouri's eastern border is entirely defined by the river, and even though St. Louis was once one of the river's most important ports. The state shaped the Mississippi's commerce, traffic, and expansion routes. Its cities grew wealthy from river trade. Its culture was formed by river economics, but the river became legendary while the state remained anonymous. The symbol escaped the place that helped create it. Missouri gave America one of its greatest icons and received no credit in return. 20. Missouri was a gateway, not a destination. The Gateway Arch in St. Louis commemorates exactly what limited Missouri's place in American memory. It was a gateway, a passage, a starting point for journeys that ended somewhere more celebrated. People passed through Missouri on the way to somewhere else: the West, California gold, Oregon farmland, opportunity, escape. Missouri was where you provisioned, organized, and launched, not where you stayed. Gateway states don't get myths. Destinations do. California gets the gold rush narrative. Oregon gets the pioneer narrative. Missouri gets a metal arch commemorating the fact that it was left behind. The state's entire identity became transitional, a place defined by what people did after they left it. That is a difficult foundation for lasting cultural memory. St. Louis lost power quietly. In the late 19th century, St. Louis was one of America's most important cities. It was the fourth largest city by population, a manufacturing powerhouse, and a river and rail hub connecting the nation's commerce. Then the 20th century arrived. Population shifted westward and southward. City borders froze in the 1870s when St. Louis separated from St. Louis County, a decision that would haunt the city for generations. Capital flowed to cities that were growing, not maintaining. St. Louis declined, not dramatically, but steadily. The collapse was not cinematic. It was administrative, demographic, and economic. Factories closed. Middle-class families moved to suburbs outside city limits. The tax base eroded. America celebrates growth. It does not know what to do with decline, especially quiet decline that happens over decades rather than in headline-grabbing moments. St. Louis's fall from prominence was too slow to be a story. 18. Missouri's decline didn't look like collapse, so it was ignored. Missouri's challenges never exploded into national consciousness because they never exploded at all. No dramatic implosion, no single crisis that demanded attention. No moment when the nation turned and asked what happened to Missouri. Just slow erosion. Factories closed one at a time. Wages flattened gradually. Young people left for opportunities elsewhere, not in a mass exodus, but in a steady trickle. Communities adapted, downsized, and managed decline without spectacle. That doesn't make good national storytelling. America wants disasters it can respond to, recoveries it can celebrate, turning points it can mark on timelines. Missouri offered none of that. Its struggles were chronic, not acute, manageable, not catastrophic. and chronic, manageable problems do not generate the attention that might actually address them. Missouri suffered quietly, and quiet suffering is invisible suffering. 17. Missouri was too early and too late. Timing matters for historical memory. States that peak at culturally significant moments get mythologized. States that peak at the wrong time get forgotten. Missouri was early to expansion, central to westward movement before the Transcontinental Railroad made that movement routine. It was early to conflict, bleeding before the Civil War officially started. It was early to industrialization along river corridors. But Missouri was late to the cultural moments that created lasting American myths. Late to the automobile age that celebrated California. Late to the Sun Belt migration that elevated Texas and Arizona. Late to the tech boom that made the coasts seem inevitable. Missouri never peaked at the right cultural moment. Its importance came before America had developed the media infrastructure to celebrate it, and it faded before that infrastructure turned its attention to the heartland. 16. The Ozarks did not fit the image America wanted. The Ozark Mountains developed in geographic isolation. That isolation created a distinct culture, including dialects, folk traditions, music, self-reliance, and ways of living that did not match what mainstream America considered respectable. That made the Ozarks easy to stereotype. Hillbilly jokes, poverty assumptions, backwardness narratives reduced a complex mountain culture to punchlines. The Ozarks were not backward. They were different. They preserved traditions, practical knowledge, and independence that industrial America was abandoning. But difference does not survive simplified narratives. It gets flattened into caricature. Complex rural cultures threaten the stories cities tell about progress, so they get dismissed, mocked, and forgotten, their complexity erased in favor of stereotypes that make urban audiences feel superior. The Ozarks deserved better than they received, but receiving what you deserve requires power. Missouri never accumulated. 15. Missouri's power was structural, not visual. Missouri did not build icons that photograph well. It built systems that function invisibly. Transportation networks, agricultural distribution, logistics infrastructure, supply chains that move goods. Americans consume without knowing where those goods passed through. The Gateway Arch is Missouri's one visual icon, and even it represents departure rather than arrival. Everything else Missouri contributed was structural, the bones of systems rather than their faces. America remembers skylines, it remembers monuments, it remembers visual symbols it can put on postcards and in movies. America does not remember supply chains. It does not remember the states that made transportation efficient or agriculture scalable. It does not remember structural contributions because structural contributions are invisible by design. Missouri's power was real. It just was not photogenic. 14. The state never learned to brand itself. Some states mastered self-promotion. California sold dreams. Texas sold size and independence. Florida sold sunshine. New York sold ambition. Missouri sold functionality, reliability, central location, practical advantages that matter to logistics companies but do not inspire tourism campaigns. In the attention economy, usefulness is invisible. What gets remembered is what gets marketed, and Missouri never developed the instinct for marketing that other states cultivated. The Show Me State motto captures this perfectly. It is skeptical, practical, unpretentious. It does not promise transformation or adventure. It promises that Missouri will not be fooled by empty claims. That is admirable. It is also terrible branding. Missouri's self-image is defensive rather than aspirational, and defensive identities do not capture imagination. Number 13. Missouri was a border state long after borders were gone. The Civil War ended in 1865, but Missouri remained psychologically divided long afterward. The tensions that split the state during the war did not resolve when the shooting stopped. They went underground, surfacing in politics, culture, economics, and family memories that passed trauma through generations. Border states do not move on easily. The conflicts were too close, too personal, too tangled in everyday relationships. Reconstruction elsewhere meant rebuilding. In Missouri, it meant living alongside people you had fought, or whose families your family had fought. That unresolved history shaped Missouri's political culture, its regional tensions, and its difficulty forming a unified state identity. Other states healed, or at least performed healing. Missouri just learned to function around wounds that never fully closed. Number 12. Missouri's politics reflect its geography. Missouri's political divisions are not ideological failures. They are geographic realities. Urban versus rural, river cities versus inland towns, northern flatlands versus southern highlands. St. Louis's relationship to the East Coast versus Kansas City's relationship to the plains. Each region developed different economic bases, different cultural influences, and different political priorities. Expecting them to align politically requires ignoring why they developed differently in the first place. Missouri's internal divisions frustrate people who want the state to pick a side. But the state contains multiple sides, it always has, and pretending otherwise just produces confusion and resentment. Political unity requires either genuine consensus or sufficient power to impose conformity. Missouri has neither. So it remains divided, not because something is broken, but because division is the natural state of a place this geographically complex. 11. Missouri was never loud enough to be feared. States that dominate national narratives are either admired or feared. They represent something powerful enough to demand attention, either as aspiration or as threat. California is admired and feared. Texas is admired and feared. New York is admired and feared. They are big enough, loud enough, and powerful enough that America cannot ignore them. They are loud. Missouri was neither admired nor feared. It was stable, necessary, competent, quiet. That is the worst position for historical memory. States that do not provoke strong reactions, positive or negative, fade into background noise. They become furniture in the American house, present, functional, unremarkable. Missouri never gave America a reason to pay attention, and attention is the currency that purchases historical memory. Missouri gets classified as Midwestern, a label that technically fits but practically obscures. The Midwest label suggests flatness, farming, and cultural uniformity. It groups Missouri with Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas in ways that erase Missouri's distinct history, its southern influences, its Appalachian regions, and its urban complexity. Missouri is not purely Midwest, but the label stuck because labels are convenient. They allow people to stop thinking about places they do not want to understand. Simplification serves cognitive efficiency, but it costs accuracy. Once Missouri became Midwestern, many of its non-Midwestern characteristics became invisible. The Ozarks do not fit Midwest stereotypes. St. Louis does not fit Midwest stereotypes, yet the label persists because changing mental categories requires effort most people will not invest. Number 9. The state was too normal to be romanticized. American mythology celebrates extremity. The gold rush promised instant wealth. Coastal cities promised reinvention. Deserts promised spiritual transformation. Mountains promised conquest. Missouri promised none of that. It offered work, trade, movement, practical advantages for practical people building practical lives. Normal does not go viral. Normal does not generate songs, movies, or tourist campaigns. Normal is what people leave in search of something more exciting. Missouri's normalcy was its strength economically, stable, functional, reliable, but it was its weakness culturally. The state never generated the romantic excess that captures the American imagination. People do not dream of Missouri. They dream of escaping to somewhere more dramatic. States people dream of escaping from do not build lasting mythologies. Missouri absorbed tension instead of broadcasting it. Missouri experienced enormous tension throughout its history over slavery, over development, over culture, over power. But that tension rarely exploded outward in ways that commanded national attention. Conflict here did not broadcast, it absorbed. Pressure built internally, released through local violence and quiet adaptation, instead of dramatic confrontation that drew outside observers. America remembers explosions. It remembers the Civil War battlefields of Gettysburg and Antietam. It remembers the civil rights confrontations of Birmingham and Selma. It remembers the moments when tension became spectacle. Missouri's tensions were just as real, but less theatrical. They simmered rather than exploded. They shaped communities without generating the dramatic moments that become historical landmarks. Absorbed tension is invisible tension, no less damaging, but far less memorable. 7. The Civil War never fully ended here. For most Americans, the Civil War is history, something that happened, ended, and receded into textbooks and battlefield tourism. For Missouri, it never fully resolved, not in memory, not in identity, not in the regional tensions that persist in forms people rarely connect to their origins. The war here was irregular, brutal, and personal in ways that formal military campaigns elsewhere were not. Guerrilla violence touched communities that never saw official armies. Neighbors who survived the war had to live alongside people who had killed their relatives. That does not heal in a generation. It fades, but it does not resolve. It becomes part of regional character, part of family memory, part of the substrate beneath contemporary politics. The Civil War ended elsewhere. In Missouri, it just got quieter. 6. Missouri was shaped by decisions made elsewhere. Missouri's trajectory was repeatedly determined by forces beyond its control: federal policies, corporate strategies, and national economic shifts that treated the state as an object rather than an agent. The Missouri Compromise was decided in Washington. Railroad routes that bypassed Missouri cities were decided in corporate boardrooms. Trade policies that affected Missouri agriculture were decided by national legislators representing other interests. Missouri lived with consequences it did not author. It adapted to decisions made elsewhere, absorbed shocks it did not create, and adjusted to realities it could not influence. States that control their own destiny tell stories of agency and triumph. States that respond to external forces tell stories of adaptation and endurance. Adaptation does not make good mythology, but it is what Missouri had available. 5. Missouri became a punchline to avoid explanation. It's easier to joke than to explain complexity. So Missouri became known as flyover country, a punchline that excused ignorance while pretending to be observation. The flyover framing reduces Missouri to an obstacle, something between coasts that matters only as distance to cross. It's not curiosity about what's there, it's dismissal dressed as geography. That wasn't truth, it was convenience. Understanding Missouri would require engaging with contradictions, historical complexity, and economic realities that do not fit simple narratives. Jokes are shortcuts that work. They signal that engagement is not required, that the place in question does not merit serious attention. That dismissal is acceptable because everyone else is dismissing it too. Missouri became a punchline because explaining it would take too long, and because punchlines do not require listening to responses. 4. Missouri challenges. America's binary thinking. American political and cultural discourse loves binaries: red or blue, north or south, urban or rural, progressive or conservative, winner or loser. Missouri refuses to choose, and that makes people uncomfortable. The state is red and blue depending on region. It is northern and southern depending on which part you examine. It is urban and rural often within the same county. It is progressive in history and conservative in recent politics. Binary thinkers cannot process this. They need Missouri to be one thing so they can categorize and dismiss it. Missouri's refusal to simplify frustrates people who have organized their worldview around clean divisions. The discomfort Missouri creates is not Missouri's failure. It is a failure of frameworks too simple to accommodate reality. Missouri's story is America's story, without the glamour. Everything America experienced, Missouri experienced: expansion, slavery, civil war, industrialization, immigration, deindustrialization, rural decline, urban struggle, political realignment. Missouri isn't exceptional, it's representative. It contains American history in concentrated form, without the glamour that makes other states' versions of that history feel heroic. California's version of expansion comes with gold rush romance. Missouri's version comes with mud, logistics, and cholera on the trail. Texas's version of independence comes with Alamo mythology. Missouri's version comes with bleeding Kansas and guerrilla atrocity. Same history, different packaging. Missouri got the version without the soundtrack, and without the soundtrack, history becomes forgettable. Number 2. Missouri was never missing from the narrative. Missouri did not fall through the cracks in American storytelling. It was actively edited out. Not because it did not matter. Missouri mattered enormously to expansion, commerce, and national development. But because including it would complicate stories that work better without complexity. The westward expansion narrative works better if Missouri is just a launching point, not a complex place with its own contested history. The Civil War narrative works better with clear sides, not a state that contained both. The Midwest narrative works better with uniformity, not a state that breaks the pattern. Missouri was edited out because it complicated stories. Editors, historians, filmmakers, politicians, and journalists chose simplicity over accuracy. The omission was not an accident. It was craft. 1. Missouri never fit the American narrative because it exposed it. Missouri doesn't fit the American narrative because Missouri shows what the narrative leaves out. It shows what happens when power is functional, not flashy. History is unresolved, not heroic. Identity is layered, not branded. Success is quiet, not celebrated. Decline is gradual, not dramatic. Missouri exposes the American preference for simple stories over complicated truths. It reveals that the narrative was always selective, always edited to include what flatters and exclude what challenges. Missouri didn't fail the narrative failed Missouri. And if the narrative failed Missouri, it probably failed other places too. Places whose complexity was similarly inconvenient, similarly edited away, similarly reduced to punchlines or silence. Missouri isn't the exception, it's the evidence. If you're from Missouri, did this feel accurate? Did it capture something you felt but never heard said out loud? And if you're not from Missouri, which truth changed how you see the state? Leave it in the comments. I read them all, and your perspective helps shape future videos. There is another video on screen right now, uncovering a truth about another place people think they understand. Subscribe to Hard Truth Untold, because the most important stories are usually the ones that don't fit cleanly anywhere.